Okay, well, if there are no other questions about that, let's move on to new material. The topic for this week is the topic on the United States Congress. And what better place to start than with some data, right? Everybody loves to look at data, right? You're like me, you like to look at data. Whoops, I pressed the wrong button. Hold on just a second. Here we go. Here is some data presented in graphical form for you to study for a moment, okay? Very regularly, on a very regular basis, the Gallup poll asks a random sample of Americans. And there are a number of polling organizations that do this, but I use the Gallup poll data, okay? The Gallup poll asks people on a very regular basis, just like they ask people whether they approve or disapprove of the way that the president is handling his job, they also ask people about Congress, okay? And here you can see a data a time series going back 40 years to the mid-1970s. And you can see that for most of this period. Can you all see this on the screen okay? Brandon, you can see this on your screen okay? How about out there at Rice? You guys can see this?
It's a little blurry, but we can understand it.
A little blurry? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't know I'm sorry. I don't know what to do with, I think your monitor out there is just, it needs to be replaced. You guys probably ought to make your concerns known to the appropriate administrators. They don't listen to me, so but they will listen to students, right? Students go down and talk to administrators about, well, we can't really see what's on the monitor in the ITV room. You know, maybe that has an impact. If I say it, they just go, okay. Anyway. Here's the basic gist of this data. For most of this period, 40-year period, a little over 40 years, a minority, in fact, a small minority of Americans say that they approve of the way that Congress is handling this job. There's only one period of exception there, leading up to and specifically in the early part of the last decade, right? Well, you can see that spike where it actually reached 84% of Americans said that they approved of the way that Congress was handled. Anybody have an explanation for that? Why might there have been that spike?
Evan?
Yeah, I think there's no question that this is a response of the American public to the events of September 11th, 2001, in very much the same way we saw a spike in George W. Bush's approval ratio. George W. Bush, when he was president, he'd only been president for like 9 months when that happened, right? So his approval ratings were just over 50%, if I remember correctly, on September 10th, 2001. But then you had those tragic events on September 11th. And George W. Bush's approval rating, I think, at its peak, spiked at about 91%. So Congress didn't get quite that high, but it got up there pretty high. 84% is pretty high. But for most of the rest of the period, you can see that, as I said, only a minority of Americans say that they approve. And in fact, the most recent numbers, look at that in 2014. Look how low it got in 2014. Only 9% of Americans said that they approve of the way that Congress is handling its job. Okay, so that's the first bit of data I want you to be aware of. Now, here's another bit of data. This isn't presented in a time series graph, but it is just the numbers. You can actually see the raw numbers. Over about the same period, a little bit less, going back to the mid-late 1970s, down to about 2014, you can see the question here that Gallup is asking people is, do you approve or disapprove of the way that your congressional district is handling his or her job? And you can see that for most of the period, with only a couple of exceptions there, majorities of Americans say that they approve of the way that their individual representative is handling the job. Now, I don't have numbers to share with you for senators, but they exist. I just didn't compile them and put them out here on the screen for you. But you can take my word for it or go look it up yourself. Majorities of Americans typically say they approve of the way that their senators. You know, if the question is, do you approve or disapprove of the way that your senator or senator, anybody know who the senators are from Texas? We have two senators from each state, right? Who are the two senators from Texas? What are the individuals' names? Does anybody know? This is probably something that you should know from this point forward, because now we're talking about Congress, and it would be very relevant for you to know the names of the senators, right? So who are the two senators from Texas? Anybody?
Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz. We sometimes refer to Ted Cruz as the junior senator because he hasn't been there as long as the other guy. The other guy who few people who know the answer to Ted Cruz, even fewer people know the senior senator's name. His name is John Cornyn. They're both Republicans, by the way. Okay? So if the question is, do you approve or disapprove of the way that Ted Cruz is handling his job as a United States Senator, most Texans, if the data that we generally see across the country holds up with respect to Ted Cruz, most Texans would say yes, they approve of the way that Ted Cruz is handling his job. Or if the question is, do you approve or disapprove of the way that John Cornyn is handling his job as a United States Senator, majorities of Texans are likely to say yes, they approve. Again, the general trend is accurate. And I think it actually is in the case of both of those senators.